Okay. Thanks everyone for being on time. Really appreciate it. So good morning everyone. So we have a very interesting topic to discuss today, and that's where we want to make it interactive as well. Make sure we capture your inputs as well and how you are looking at things as well. So today we have a topic which is called as browser isolation, the new secret sauce. So hi everyone, I'm Ismeet Singh. I'm the manager for content security. So I have worked with multiple security companies like Symantec, Forcepoint, and had been with Cisco for almost 14 years. So within my 14 years of tenure in Cisco, I had an opportunity to work with various fields, first from the TAC, where usually whenever you open up a case, that comes to the TAC, where the TAC are helping you, guiding you to go and get things moving on and tweaking those things. So I had worked with wireless and VPN. Then I was a pre-sales guy working directly with you as customers, talking to the solution, how we can make sure this solution would be deployed in your network, how it can be deployed and all that stuff. Plus, within my Symantec tenure, I was the DLP specialist, working on the DLP as a technology as one of the resource there. And lastly, for last almost 6 to 7 years, I've been working as a TME for content security. So that's a basic profile about me. Now, moving from there, what we have today in the agenda, what we would be covering. So starting with an introduction, where I want to talk about what are the threats which we are seeing and why exactly we are looking at this browser isolation as a new secret sauce. Then talk about a little bit about working of the solution, how good this can be worked with your current infrastructure. That's where we want to look at. You have web security, how can it be attached to web security? If you have email security, how it can be attached to email security. So we would be looking at those use cases, those specific demos, all that stuff. And it has embedded videos, which I would be also playing. And later on, I would be adding those videos to a YouTube so that you can go and refer that as well. So we would have, lastly, I would conclude that while looking at how beneficial are those use cases for your organization as well. So let's go ahead and get started with this kind of introduction. Now, one thing which I believe this is something which is a key buzz which we all hear, that is ransomware. Am I right? So this is one of the example, a supermarket in Ukraine, which was being affected with the ransomware, where people were standing in the queue, the PCs are not working, and they're standing in the queue to do the billing. But they were not able to do the billing because they were being infected with this ransomware. And that ransomware had a text file which was just encrypted, and what they were looking at is give us 300 bitcoins, $300 of bitcoins, just to go and get the decryption. Now, how many of you have seen this picture or know what this port is? Anyone? Yes, sir? Barcelona. Yes, correct. So this is Port of Barcelona, and again, it also got the ransomware attack. Okay, that was in 2018. And people were looking at just before, almost about 2 days prior, their organization was tweeted saying that no one is immune to cyber attacks. They tweeted that before that. And just after 2 days, they got this attack. And after that, they tweeted again saying that cyber attack has affected several of their servers. But again, they were not ready to go ahead and pay ransom. And that's where they were looking at how we can go ahead and quickly go ahead and get this thing rectified. Now, almost 5 days later, there was again an attack on a port that was in San Diego. And again, the similar kind of a trend, similar kind of where all the servers were encrypted and they had a halt, especially in the San Diego, for the normal operations for the port itself. So that was the severe attack which was happening on the port, especially keeping in mind from the Barcelona to the San Diego. Now, we as security evangelists, we always look at different organizations, different vendors to define some kind of a security strategy. Am I right in saying that? So can anyone tell me what is the security strategy which you are looking at within your organization? Any security strategy for which you want to say, okay, this is something which I believe would be the right security strategy. Anyone? Come on, guys. You are all security guys. Any security strategy which you think within your organization which you want to adapt? Yeah. Sorry? Yep. Okay. Sure. So if we look at what I'm thinking of any kind of a security strategy, especially keeping in mind we as security persons, reassurance, first of all, that the attack won't bring the house or our jobs down. Am I right? Everyone is working, right? We want to make sure that the job is not gone away, right? And the second thing is reassurance that those specific threats won't break the bank, like there should not be a big hole within our bank itself or with that specific amount of dollars. Now, keeping that security strategy into consideration, now when I look at what is my 90% of the major attack vector, which basically brings me that specific attacks from happening, that is email and web. So this is your 90% of your attack vector. So if we look at this 90% of our attack vector in a little bit more details, starting with the web attack vector, so we see nowadays when you look at your HTTPS traffic or your encrypted traffic, which is landing from 60 to 80% in any organization. You would agree, right? Yep. And if we look at this, what the hackers are using, they are using the malware distributed with legitimate website itself. Like say, for example, a news website has so many advertisements. So what they are trying to do is immune or add those advertisements or infect those advertisements with some malicious code itself, or which is pointing to some URL which is going and affecting that specific system. So rather than they using a normal website, but they are using a legitimate website where people are browsing on a daily basis. Now from there, we are also seeing an increase in SaaS usage, or what I call as SaaS applications, like we use WebEx, right? Salesforce, Box, Dropbox, these are all your SaaS-based applications. And now people are concerned about which are the right SaaS-based applications which we want to use within our company itself, where they want to define this is a sanctioned app or unsanctioned app. Now moving from there, I believe whenever we are browsing, we all browse using a browser, right? So what the hackers are, they are knowing that there would be some kind of for security within an organization. Let's look at the browser itself on how we can go and infect the browser or take advantage of the browsers. So that's where, if we look at the threat vector coming in from a lot of cybersecurity reports, it's around 42% is basically coming in from the browser itself as a threat. And how many of you are not using these three browsers? Anyone? In your organization, anyone who is not using these browsers? Okay, one out of so many people. Just one. And if we look at the vulnerabilities, there are 1,000+ vulnerabilities on just these three browsers. So that's one of the reasons it becomes very critical for us to look at the right strategy on how to make sure we are able to go and take a corrective control there. So moving from web to email, which is another threat vector, if we look at email, one is definitely the malware, right? Where people want to go and use attachment within your email and send you a malware. The other thing is the business email compromise, where they want to go and draft an email which looks like, oh, it's coming in from, might be the admin, or from a company which we are trying to buy, like a merger and acquisition, and they're asking for some confidential information or some information where they can make a transaction. So this is a kind of a trend which is happening every day down the line, where they're using some kind of a social engineering just to go and figure that out, how quickly they can draft an email and send it to the right audience so that he can go and give him that kind of an information. Furthermore, phishing. I believe this becomes a very, very important topic to talk about in depth, but I believe nowadays from an SMS to an email, everyone gets a link, right? As a curiosity's sake, when it's a link which really relates to our daily transactions or daily job schedules, we really want to look at that link. And that's what the hackers are using as an advantage. Like one of the good examples of phishing was my that was when one of my manager got an email saying that, hey, you have not paid for this Apple game. And it's coming in from legitimate Apple itself. And that hacker drafted that email such nicely that it shows that he has not given or made the payment for that game itself. He had to go to that, click on that link, which takes him to directly like a Apple website, and that's where it's asking for those credentials. So my point is, people are using everyday advantage of the things which they have done the social engineering with while drafting any kind of an email. Lastly is domain compromise, like where people are trying to use like similar kind of domains to go and send you an email. Like we use mobile devices like crazy, and everyone wants to go and check something, what email are we getting, but we do not check the content, like what is the email address. We just see, oh, it's coming in from Ismeet. I know it's Ismeet, he belongs to my organization. Okay, let me go and respond back. And that's where they try to go and use those similar or look-like domains just to go and draft those specific emails. Now, keeping in mind these two important threat vectors, how we can go and make sure we use this solution as an RBI in conjunction with what you have as a security, which we call as web or email security. So what are the use cases which we are trying to address here? Like any point of time, whenever you're using a web security, you always have something what we call as uncategorized URLs, right? Everyone sees that, right? Whatever solution you're using, whether it's an NG firewall, whether it's supposed to be web security, you would find URL categories there, right? That's where there are so many categories which are coming up on a daily basis where you cannot go and cope up with that kind of a speed. That's where you need to go and define, okay, there's something called as uncategorized URLs, right? Now, the other one is the phishing URLs, where we want to make sure that we have the right strategy just to go and target those phishing URLs, where it should not go and hamper our production itself. Then is the important aspect which also comes along with this is content disarm, which we call a CDR as a technology. Now, when we look at any of these contents, which are basically the files, they have something what we call as active content, how we can go and leverage while disarming this active content itself. We'll talk about that in details. And lastly is, if you have your C-level or your top execs where you want to make sure their traffic gets to this RBI solution along with whatever you're using as your web security or email security itself. So this is what we define as important use cases on why you would like to go and look at as an RBI solution, okay? Now, if we look at this RBI solution, first of all, we as Cisco, we tie up with the RBI solutions which are there in the market. So we tie up with the technology vendor like Ericom or Menlo just to go and provide you with this RBI as a solution, over and above what we have as email or web security, okay? So that's where you would see a lot of examples on, and a lot of configuration example on what you're using as your current web security or email security and how you can go and take the advantage of this RBI solution. Now, when we look at this RBI solution, it's available in two form factors. One is in the cloud, where you can go and have a cloud level of RBI solution. The other one is on-prem, where you want to go and have this in your DMZ. Okay, so these are the two form factors where you can go and have this RBI. Now, along with that, you can also have what we call as selective isolation, which means you can have it for your C-level or top execs or whomsoever you want this RBI solution to be part of it. Or you can have full isolation. I have even customers talking about, oh, I want to have all the traffic go as an isolation, especially like when you're talking about it might be federal, or you want to have those specific military as one of your use cases. That's where I want everything go to, might be a full isolation environment itself. Then is file sanitization, which we'll talk about how you want to disable the active content itself. And lastly is anti-phishing. So these are all the features which you get with an RBI solution itself. And let's go ahead and look at that in details, how it would be beneficial for your organization with your current web or email security as a deployment. Now, before we run into that, let's also look at some of the industry adoptions, or why we are thinking about this RBI, or why is the KISS this kind of a, you can say, a buzzword right now, where the organization really want this kind of a solution. So one of the first thing which is coming in from Gartner itself, where they are saying if you're effectively isolating the browser executional code or executable code, the attack can be minimized by 70%. That's a huge number. Okay, that's not a small number, and while eliminating the need to detect the malware. So this is a very huge number when we are talking about suppressing any kind of an attack vector itself. And as per the projection, 25% of enterprise would, as per Gartner, will deploy RBI solution by 2022. So this is a huge number when they are looking at as an RBI adoption itself. Now, let's look at how this RBI works and what is the logic behind that? How is it different than whenever I'm browsing any internet traffic? How exactly would it be different? So let's look at a normal browsing, like you're going to one of the news website like ABC News. This is how the normal website would look like. But if you look at the source, this is what the source would be, which would have almost all your JavaScripts, all your cross-reference links, your scripting, your external URLs. This is what would be there as a backend in your source itself. And when you're browsing, sorry about the running fast. And when you're browsing it using an RBI, this is a normal ABC News. And now when you look at your source, this is how it would be minimized. Okay, where automatically, if you look at the JavaScripts, your CSS scripts, your external URLs are all 0. So let's look at this by double-clicking on it, what exactly it is. So within RBI solution, these are all the types of things which you would have as a count, where it would have JavaScripts, your font, your images, your iframes, all that stuff. And within RBI solution, this is how minimized it is. Sounds interesting? Yes, no? Yep. Now let's look at this in further details. How exactly does this work, right? So first of all, it's a client-less solution. You do not need to deploy anything on your endpoints, okay? Nothing is required on your endpoints. So which means by default, all your HTTP or HTTPS traffic goes to the proxy solution, which over here is the Cisco WSA, and you can use any proxy solution. And from there, it goes to the orchestrator, which is the RBI solution. Again, the RBI solution is working like you can say a container, where exactly your traffic would be browsed. So which means your request goes to the orchestrator, which would automatically pick any container, whatever is available right now. And from there, the traffic would go to the internet. And while coming back again, which means by default, it's coming via the container itself. So all your browsing is happening within the container itself. So which means any malware which is coming in or which is infecting your machine, it would not come to your machine because it's getting browsed through the container. So everything is happening within the container itself. We are just getting the copy directly to the machine itself. So any point of time, if there is any threat which is happening, especially for the use cases which we would be targeting, it's automatically being taken care. So that's the beauty about what we call as the browser isolation. Now let's look at that in our real time. How important would this be in our organization, and how can we adapt with our existing proxy solution? Okay, so that's where I'm talking about how browser isolation can work with your web security appliance. So that's what I'm taking into consideration. So Cisco has a WSA, which is an on-prem solution as a proxy solution. So let's take a look. So again, when I talk about this on-prem proxy solution, it's available in multiple form factors. One, we have a hardware which has multiple models, like from 195 to 695, depending upon your organization, you can adapt that. Or you also have another important aspect is a virtual form factor. So you can have whether it's Microsoft Hyper-V, whether it's VMware, whether it's KVM, or whether it's your public cloud like AWS, you can use any of this form factor to go and deploy this WSA. Okay? Now let's look at the use cases. Why would I use this browser isolation in conjunction to any of your web proxy? So the first use case is talking about the risky sites, or might be a risky category itself. So when we look at risky sites, like as I was mentioning about news websites, which has so many cross-reference links, that's where you can use that category to go and send that traffic to browser isolation. Or might be, say, for example, Gmail. As we all use our personal mail account, I want to make sure that I defend that account from all the malware. So any point of time, if it is a zero-day malware or any of those things, that again goes through the browser isolation. Versus the other URL categories can automatically go directly to the internet using the proxy itself. So you can have selective categories which goes through the browser isolation. Now moving further, especially with respect to the top execs. Now one of the good example which we have seen, like the HR, they get CVs on a daily basis, right? Everyone wants to go and look at some new role or responsibilities. They would be getting those CVs where people would be saying, can you just go and patch this guy in, or any of those things. When we look at these CVs, the hackers are using the CV to put some kind of a malware in. Okay, so what they want to do is that they want to have that HR as one of the guy whenever they are getting those CVs which are getting from your personal email account or any of those things, that goes through the browser isolation. So that's where you want to have those C-levels or top execs, their traffic to land into an isolated or air gap in network itself. Then last but very important use case which we discussed before is the uncategorized URLs. Because if we look at that, there are millions of websites which are created on a daily basis. And any solution in the market today would not be able to cope up with that millions of websites which are being created every day, whatever solution you deploy. So that's where for specific uncategorized URLs, the right way to look at is you can always go and send that traffic to something which can put that specific website in an air gap network. That's what we are trying to go and achieve using this specific use case. So which means by default, as Cisco, we do not have that intelligence of that website because that website just came up yesterday. We do not know whether it's a good or a bad website, which we would come to know, but after a little bit of time, right? When it's being browsed once or any of those things. But in that case, what you want to do is you want to use that specific uncategorized websites to go through the RBI solution. Now let's look at that in a kind of a detail while doing a configuration on the WSA itself. So for the folks who are using WSA, this would become very easy for you to go and relate how you can go and define what we call as an upstream proxy. So what we are trying to go and add over here for the uncategorized URL, one of the upstream proxy as an RBI solution. We give an IP address, we give a port number, we give a reconnection attempts and connect directly. We define that over here, click on submit. And after that, commit changes is something which is really much required. We add that, put the comments in, why we are adding this configuration. For auditing purpose, you can definitely go and refer that. Go and click on commit changes. And as soon as that commit changes has happened, now you have added your upstream proxy. What you need to do is now go to the Web Security Manager, go to your routing policies, first of all, where we want to make sure that this specific upstream proxy is added. So you can say from add policy, sorry, taking a little bit of time, but it should be good. Yep. You just add policy over here as an RBI traffic. You can give a description and you can select an identity over here. So I'm just saying hotel internet right now. So I have that. Now over here I can define the port number as well. So by default I know that the port number where I want to send that traffic is 3128. So I can go ahead and define the port number over here as 3128 and click on done. And after this we'll just go and define our URL categories, which is basically the RBI socket layer, which is there for the RBI solution. And down below is what we have, the uncategorized URLs. So for the use case of uncategorized URLs, that's what we are defining over here, and we say done. So as soon as that's being done, now we have a mapping of both in the policy, the port number, the URL categorization, and we can click on submit. So as soon as we do that, now the perspective would be defining the routing destination as an upstream proxy. So you need to go ahead and attach it over here rather than global policy. We select over here the RBI solution which we created as an upstream proxy. Click on submit. And after submitting, we can just go ahead and check everything over here. After checking this, we can just go ahead and say commit the changes just to make sure that it's being pushed to the WSA itself. So we just over here click on commit changes, add the description. And here we go. So these changes have taken effect and now we are good to go. So let's go ahead and do a testing while sending this traffic and figuring that out, how quickly we can go ahead and change the preferences over here. So I have this WSAV in public cloud. That's one of the reasons I'm using that public IP as a proxy. So put that proxy in over here. Click OK. Now I'm trying to right now browse a normal traffic, like say google.com, and just click on test. And if you see everything works, it's going through the proxy. Now I'm trying to add a website which is not being categorized by us. It's yachet.com, some new website, okay? So this is, if you see, now this new website is going through the RBI solution, and if you look at the source, this is what the source is. Now in the source, if you see, it's basically going to an ICAP server. So this ICAP server is that server of your RBI solution. Okay, so this is the normal code which is being infected where using an ICAP, it's basically landing up to that RBI solution. Now let's look at even how you can, so when I talk about WSA, that was on-prem proxy. Now we would also look at the configuration, what you need on Umbrella. Any of you over here using Umbrella, Cisco Umbrella? Yep, okay. So let's look at the configuration on how you can go ahead and even define this RBI solution on Cisco Umbrella as well. So again, everyone out here knows that we acquired a company, OpenDNS, from where we got this Umbrella as a solution. Now within that, it can be used for web gateway, now with the new offering, as well as with firewall. But what we are looking at over here is defining this specific configuration on if you are using the DNS security or the web gateway itself. So we look at both the configuration. So what is the use case again on the Umbrella side? Some specific URL categories you want to send it to the RBI solution, the same categories which we discussed on WSA. Now in this over here, if you see the categories which we discussed with WSA, we were using webmail and news, am I right? Same thing, what we would be taking as an action is block. So in Umbrella, what we are doing over here, we are saying these two categories needs to be blocked, okay? And there would be something what we call as a block page, am I right? So whenever there are so many people over here who have Umbrella, so there would be a block page. In the block page itself, you would define the RBI solution, okay? This is how the configuration looks like. So let's look at the configuration. So first is in the DNS policies itself, when you define this, there is something what we call as a custom block page. That's where you want to go and click on. And same goes with if you are using web policies as well, there would be something what we call as a custom block page. So if you go to this custom block page, you have these 4 settings over here on how you can go and define the policies for the RBI. So block by category, blocked by destination, blocked by phishing settings, or blocked by security settings. So you can select any of these settings and define over here where it says redirect the user to this URL. That's where you define your URL for the RBI solution. Okay? Now, moving from the web perspective to a little bit deeper on the files. That's where even with the RBI solution, I discussed one of the important aspects is file sanitization. Okay, so let's look at what exactly is this file sanitization, or there is a keyword which we call as CDR, which is content disarm. So what we are trying to achieve over here, when we look at the files, especially the Office document files, they all now have what we call as a macros or active content. These active contents are made of like, might be, say for example, in a PDF, it would be JavaScript, embedded files, open actions, objects, or document catalogs. All these are part of a PDF. But if you look at the Microsoft documents, you would find macros or OLE objects. Am I right? That's what you would find, right? So what we are trying to do with the CDR as a technology is disarming all this active content. So which means by default, we remove this active content from that file itself, which means it would be not harmful for the organization or for that specific user itself. That's what we are trying to achieve using the CDR as a technology. So let's look at this as into a demo itself, which would be a little bit more clear. Now this is supposed to be an Excel file which has a macro where it's asking for year. Any of the column which I click, it asks me for an year, okay, which means I need to add an input over there. Now what I do is I take this file, put it to a box, and now from the box I'm trying to download, because it's going through my RBI solution, you would see what would happen. Now as soon as I'm downloading this file, it's saying sanitizing this file, okay, which means by default it's running the CDR. Now as soon as that's being sanitized and I save this file and I've tried to open this file, the same catalog or the same file remains the same, the content is the same, but now when I click on it, it says it's disabled. Okay, so all that active content within this file is disabled. Now if you click on the static content, you can still modify the static content, you can still put whatever the changes you want, and you can save it. Okay, so this is what is happening as a CDR as a technology within our browser isolation as a technology. Now there is an important aspect for the files as well. So when you're looking at the files, you also have executable files. So CDR as a technology would not take care of your executable files because they do not have that much intelligence. So that's where the solution which you're using as a web security down the line, that would be basically taking care with whatever the engines it has, like web reputation, anti-malware, or advanced malware protection. So all these three engines would kick in whenever you have these executable file and make sure that it gives you a protection there. But again, for specifically your Office documents, that's where you can go ahead and use the CDR as a technology which can go ahead and disable the active content itself. Now, moving from here to the RBI solution for email security. Now, this is something which is again becoming one of the topic where they really wanted to understand what are the use cases, why we need these specific things. Now, you would have seen nowadays when you look at the emails, you would find a lot of links out there. Am I right? There are people who are drafting emails with just the link. As a curiosity's sake, you would always click on that link. So in order to go and address those things, that's where this RBI solution with email security is very, very important. Now let's look at this, one of the use case where we have something called as uncategorized URL or suspicious URL within an email. Obviously, when I look at malware URL within an email, that would be definitely being quarantined by any email security solution, or if you're using Cisco email security solution, it would be quarantined. So how many of you are using Cisco email security? Awesome. So by default, if you're using Cisco ESA or might be CES, it would be automatically being quarantined. But we are looking at a use case where it's suspicious URL or it's something which is uncategorized URL. And how to go and deal with that. In order to go and deal with that, what we do over here on Cisco ESA itself or CES, within our content filter, we would define that this is my browser isolation. So which means send that URL, whatever that URL is, which is suspicious URL or which has no score, to the browser isolation as a solution. Okay? That's the important use case which we are trying to address with this configuration. Now, the second important use case which we are also trying to address, especially again for your top execs or might be the C-level, where you also want to use that, how can we go and make sure any email which comes with the link, I want to send to a browser isolation. So you can create a policy for email itself where you define any point of time there is a link which is coming in, send that link to the browser isolation for those specific set of users. Now, let's look at the configuration on the email security, what you need in order to go and achieve this integration with the browser isolation. So if you look at the content filter, where you go to the mail policies, content filter, you define an action. That's where this action would be, where you go to the URL reputation. So in this URL reputation, obviously there is, we have malicious, neutral, and clean. You can always use that, what we call as a neutral, into this suspicion, or you can also use what we call as a no score. You see over there as no score, right? Sorry. We see over there as no score. Yeah. Where is it? Yeah. If you see this over here, it says no score, which means any point of time we do not have any kind of a score for that URL itself. So in that case, we also want to make sure, which means it's uncategorized. We do not have any information of that URL. So for that also, I want to send it to the browser isolation. So I can define that. Now, within right now, your email security, you would have an action over there saying that replace the URL with the text message. So that's where you define right now as your way of doing the integration. But we are also coming up with an automated way, which I'll just go and talk, which is coming up in the roadmap as well. But again, as soon as you define that over there, this is how it would look like. You would have the URL where you want to redirect. This is the URL for the RBI solution. Now in the roadmap, what we are doing is that we are making it automated, where automatically you define that this is the remote browser config. You define the what you call as the IP and the port number. And now what would happen is you would get this option over here which says redirect to the remote browser proxy. So automatically there would be a configuration on the ESA which would redirect it to the proxy, and you can define the IP or the host name or whatever the case is. But again, this is something which we are looking at within the roadmap itself. But for the folks who are using it, they can use that feature, what we call as replace URL with the text message right now if they want to leverage it, but we are making it something as an automated. Now, moving from this on ESA to an important topic, what we call as phishing, right? And I believe one of the important URL which I believe I use pretty often is OpenFish. How many of you use OpenFish or check OpenFish? Okay, so might be this is one of the keyword which you can always use as a URL. So this OpenFish really helps you to give you a lot of intelligence on how many might be companies are getting infected, how many accounts are getting infected with phishing, as well as how many brands are right now at stake. So if you see over here, we can find this global phishing activity, which I just took a snapshot yesterday, this is what's going on as an OpenFish activity, if you see over here. Now, we can also look at what are the top 10 target brands. Now, if you see over here, these are very, very huge brands which are at stake. So if you see Steam, how many of you know what is Steam? Yep, most of you, right? So gaming, especially the guys who know Steam, it's the gaming, right? So that's something which is the maximum of phishing attack. Maximum phishing attack. Then comes the Chase Personal Bank. I do have a video which would talk about that. Then we have Rediff. Then I was very surprised because I have Bank of America as my account, and I was like, what the hell? So it was like you would find that phishing attacks happening on Bank of America so much. So these are all the things. Now, most of you would be using Office 365, right? Am I right? So Office 365, I was surprised, like whatever you talk about, they want to use that as an attack for phishing, which is basically being used by the industry. Then they talk about the sectors. If you look at the sectors, you have financial, which is the number one. Definitely when you're looking at the banks out there. Then the gaming, that's where we have the Steam. Then the online services. Now, another good example which I was seeing for online service, whenever we want to do shopping, right? We want to always look at what is the cheapest option, am I right? Right? Whenever we're doing it, whether it's with Amazon or eBay. So there are websites which gets loaded and which gets the right, you can say first or second within the Google itself, where they have this website coming up where you try to go and buy that option, but again, that's a phishing email or a phishing website itself. So that's something which is happening a lot right now when you're looking at might be e-commerce or looking at buying any of these stuff online. Now let's look at, which I was talking about, Bank of America. So that's, again, this was the same website. If you ever visited Bank of America, it's exactly the same. All the things are exactly the same, how it would appear in an original website. But what we are trying to achieve with this, when you have basically traffic traversing through an RBI, first of all, when you're looking at email security or any of those solutions, definitely you would be getting protected with RBI or with your email security solution for phishing. But if you're looking at above and beyond, where you're using some specific URL within an RBI solution, the RBI solution also provides you with phishing protection. And the beauty which I like about the RBI over here is that they have some feature which is called as warning and read only, which is a very different feature than any solution which would be providing. Because when we look at the solutions, they usually provide block or allow. Am I right? That's usually what is being provided. But they have a very nice where they would say warning, which means you are able to, which website you are going, there would be a warning. And along with that, it would also give you a read only, which means you cannot enter any information there. So let's talk, or let's look at this in further detail. So this is a Wells Fargo website. This is supposed to be a legitimate website right now. It goes to wellsfargo.com. And if you look at over here, I can enter the username, and it gets entered without any kind of an issue. I can enter the password as well. Perfect. That works beautifully. Now let's look at a website which is supposed to be a phishing website. Now if you look at the link, first of all, as a read-only, you get this as a prompt. And if you look at the link, basically it's taking you to this specific website. But again, these are all embedded where you would not know. And as soon as you click on, okay, I've got it, which means the phishing which the end user would get, when you try to enter a username, it would not allow you to enter the username. Even if I'm trying to use a virtual keyboard and trying to enter a username, nothing works. So which means it's a read-only access. Okay? And if I go back to my legitimate website and try to enter any stuff, I can go and do that without any kind of a problem. But on that website, it was taken away. That's what we call as a read-only access. Now, the last thing which I also want to go and talk about is Office 365, which I was talking about as an example. Again, when we talk about as a phishing, as a read-only access, this is where you get that as a read-only prompt, which would come up with Office 365 as well. So to summarize what we discussed today, first of all is the unknown URLs. Any point of time, whenever you're using that, with any solution in the market, that's where the RBI solution really plays an important role. Second is the web security. So especially when you want to isolate traffic for your top execs or your C-level, that's where you want to use this RBI solution. And even with respect to your email security, especially when we are talking about the use cases for the uncategorized URLs within the link itself, or which are suspicious URLs, you want to send it to the emails or to the RBI solution. Lastly is the dynamic content within a file. So any point of time you want to use the CDR as a technology where you want to sanitize those specific files, that's where you also use the RBI solution. So any questions? I do have time to take up questions, or if you have anything which is not coming, which was not clear. Yeah.
If I understand it correctly, Cisco don't propose the web generator on itself. What do you have trusted advice that we can refer on to integrate with your project? Or?
Yeah, so we integrate with the RBI solutions in the market. Like that's where I was talking about Mello or the Ericom of the worlds. And that's how we can go ahead and do the integration with web security or email security or the firewalls as well, just to go ahead and give you that functionality.
Okay, this is not something that we will develop in the next.
No, not what we have as a selling in within the Cisco. Yeah, that's one of the reason I was trying to show you what are the configuration on the various product lines, Umbrella or WSA or ESA, you need to do to go ahead and get that integrated.
So do we need to buy Mello and Ericom separately or something?
Yes. You need to buy. So we have created some kind of, within our sales team or Cisco sales team, you can get in touch with them. They have people who would automatically plug into that specific, whomsoever is the customer, and get help while making sure that you are able to go and sell that, and they can go and do the presentation and give you the solution.
Something in your GPA?
Sorry?
Is there something in your catalog in the GPA?
Not the GPA right now. Not right now. Yeah.
Are these companies in the world of solutions?
Yes. So in my booth, I would also showcase you this solution. If you any point of time come to Umbrella and WSA booth, we can showcase you this solution as well. Any question? Okay, so one last thing, if you want to join the team space and if you still have further questions, more than happy to go and answer those questions as well. And I believe the survey is something which is really helpful so that you can go and give your comments, what else do you need. And lastly, I would say that's where I was talking about World of Solution. We are there at Umbrella and WSA booth. Please come and visit us. If there are some more things which you want to see, more than happy to go and showcase you out there. Okay, thank you everyone for coming in. It was really nice.